Pope Francis this week decided against allowing priests in the Amazon region to marry. The proposal from progressive bishops aimed to address the shortage of clergy there. The Pope, however, did not tackle the question of priestly celibacy in his response that was published on Wednesday. His decision comes months after a meeting of bishops at the Vatican in October to discuss the Amazon region. Canada Moss joins me now. She's a Cadbury professor at the School of Philosophy, Theology, and Religion at the University of Birmingham. So, Canada, why was Pope Francis originally considering lifting the celibacy requirements?
Well, Pope Francis is, as you know, from Latin America himself, and this meeting of bishops was actually all Latin American bishops who were deeply concerned because there is a global shortage of priests in the Catholic Church. But in Latin America in particular, that means that there are regions as big as Oregon that only have one priest available to staff them. And what this means isn't just that people aren't getting to go to Mass, they actually aren't able to baptize their children, to get married with a priest there, or even to have priests perform funerals.
I know that a lot of people were thinking that he was going to lift this restriction, at least in this area, because of those reasons. We heard from the former Pope, Pope Benedict, that he was very much against this through that book that was published with a little bit of scandal attached to it as well. Do you think that that had any influence in Pope Francis's decision?
Well, I do think that Francis was aware that there was huge backlash from conservative Catholics within the Church who looked to Benedict to sort of champion their cause. And there was some intrigue around the publication of that book. Shortly after it was published, Benedict retracted his authorship and said, oh, no, I didn't co-author this book.
Retracted his authorship, but not what he said.
That's right. And it's clear that Benedict is opposed to the idea of married priests in the Church. So I think that that does play into Francis's decision-making, but also he's a very practical man. And when you look at the document that he released, he was talking about the biggest threats to the Amazon being the defenestration and the destruction of the rainforests and poverty in the region. And I think ultimately he realizes, what's the point of having married priests if there's no one there for them to minister to?
So how we know then basically how conservatives are responding to this within the Catholic religion, but how are more progressive Catholics responding?
Well, I imagine that behind closed doors they're quite disappointed. But some bishops from Central America have spoken out about this apostolic exhortation, have said they really appreciate Pope Francis drawing attention to the problems in the area and putting the global spotlight on Latin America and Central America. But the door also isn't completely closed yet. So Francis just ignored the issue. He didn't say anything about it at all. So there's still the possibility that he might return to the question of married priests and revisit it at a sort of more opportune time.
And there is some provision within the Catholic religion for married priests.
That's absolutely right. This is considered to be something that is done by tradition rather than by doctrine. The first Pope, St. Peter, was married, for example. And there are currently married priests in the Catholic Church who play various roles. So this isn't unprecedented.
And I know a lot of people were thinking that the way Francis responded in terms of this call for the celibacy requirements to be lifted in the Amazon, that it might portend what could happen in terms of his openness to allowing females to be ordained as priests. Any word on that, or does that really just, that door is just too far to even consider at this point?
Well, you know, Francis is very sensitive. He listens. He's a very emotional, caring pope. And so he has listened to calls for the ordination of women as deacons, but thus far has been opposed to that means. That said, is it possible that down the line he might change his opinion about this? I think we should certainly look for married priests first before we expect Francis to make changes about women's ordination.
So this obviously has big implications for Catholics, but are there greater implications for non-Catholics and the rest of the world?
Well, I think what Francis is trying to do here is to get people's attention focused on the environment, on ecological issues, and on poverty. And that has really been the hallmark of his ministry from the very beginning. We've been talking here at CBS about that for years now. And I think what he's trying to say, instead of looking at the institutional structure of the Catholic Church, let's look at the issues that actually affect the world.
Canada Moss, thank you.
Thank you.